Hi everyone, Petrik here. Today's video will be another book review and it will be on Rise of the Ranger by Philip C. Quaintrell. So this is the first out of 9 books in the Echoes Saga series, and this series has been on my radar for more than 2 years now. I think I first stumbled upon this series on Amazon. My attention towards this series initially appeared because of the gorgeous cover art. Yeah, I really love the cover art for this series that's illustrated by Chris McGrath. Each book in the series has a wonderful cover art, and also the rating for this series, for each book in the series, is incredibly high. The 9th and the last book in the series, A Clash of Fate, currently has 4.78 average rating out of 1.2k ratings. That's insanely high. It's also why I'm so curious why so few people in the bookish social media talk about this series. And now I finally took a plunge and I finally give it a chance. And although I don't think that Rise of the Ranger reached the height of, well, that kind of average rating yet, but it is certainly a promising beginning to a classic epic fantasy series that's told with a modern voice. If you haven't started this series yet, do know that this series has been completed and now there is a prequel series in the work as well. I figure it's the right time for me to finally check this out, and I'm really glad that I did. As I said, Rise of the Ranger is the first out of 9 books in the Echoes Saga by Philip C. Quaintrell. The story takes place in the land of Ilion, where human has ruled for 1,000 years by building on the ruins left by the elves. The elves are immortal and superior creatures. Physically, they're stronger, faster, and connected to the magical realm more than human. While the 6 kingdoms of men are fractured and unallied, the elves are rising. War is coming and individuals and factions around the world will clash. As you can probably predict from the premise, Rise of the Ranger is Quaintrell's take on the modern epic fantasy series while retaining everything that's good about classic fantasy. And as I constantly said, I have a soft spot for classic fantasy books with a modern voice and the author's own twist to them. A few examples of my favorites being The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne, The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding, and the Raveling Trilogy by Alec Hudson. Rise of the Ranger is really showing promises that I will love this series more and more as I make my way through it. However, if this is your first time reading through this series, do note that Rise of the Ranger takes its time to be great. I really hope that future readers of Rise of the Ranger will be patient enough to read through the first 35% of the book. And believe me, it gets better after that. The thing is, the beginning section of this book can feel a bit rough here and there. I think Quaintrell requires some time to find the right footing for this book and the rest of the series. In a similar way to Malice by John Gwynne, in regarding the pacing, not the content of the book, Quaintrell used almost the first half of the book to introduce all the characters and also the world building carefully. I will admit that I did find the pacing of the first 35% or 50% of the book to be slightly too slow sometimes, but I think my expectations is not without guilt here. The cover art and also the premise have led me to think that Rise of the Ranger and maybe the rest of the series will be a series that's heavily focused on Asher as the main character. And yes, Asher, the guy in the cover art, is indeed one of the main characters of the series. But I totally didn't expect that Rise of the Ranger would actually feature more than 8 main POV characters to follow. That's quite a surprise, and it did take me some time to get used to because lately I don't think I've read many epic fantasy series that actually use more than 8 POV characters somehow. This storytelling style eventually works in favor of the scope and narrative of the book, and I'm sure it will work really well for the rest of the series. It has become a great foundation. From the get-go, I immediately took a liking to Asher and Gallagher as the POV characters, but I honestly wasn't really sure yet about all the other POV characters when they were first introduced. However, as the author's prose gets more accessible and more well-polished as the book goes by, characterizations for all the main characters and also the interactions between each and every one of them ended up winning me over. Seeing Asher's continuous developing friendship with Nathaniel, Alate, and Phelan was so heartwarming in my opinion. And I also love reading the complex dynamic between Gallagher and Gideon Thorne. I think Quaintrell has successfully used his POV characters to tell the theme of friendship, bravery, and duty incredibly well. And then there is also Alidir. Alidir is the villain in Rise of the Ranger. I don't know about you, but I tend to find that having a villain as one of the POV characters always increases the tension and the complexity of the narrative. It always made the story more compelling and also more engaging, and I think that has been achieved by Quaintrell here by including Alidir as one of the POV characters. Speaking of intensity, I must say that I am so impressed by Quaintrell's action scenes. Lately, especially in classic epic fantasy novel, it's getting harder for me to discover authors who write vivid battle scenes that flow so easily. We have humans, elves, dragons, magic, and the Arrakis fight each other, and I was utterly engrossed. Also, the Arrakis is one of the coolest group of assassins I ever encountered in the fantasy series visually. I mean, just check out this passage. Open quote, "From the day you're inducted, the Order's alchemist puts you on a regime of Night's Eye elixir, one vial every day until you're 25. After that, you're permanently affected, but the elixir was developed for elves. In humans, the potion only works if the user is in complete darkness, and that's why Arrakis use blindfolds. When completely blinded, you can see, hear, taste, smell, and feel everything. Your reactions are heightened as your senses tune you into the world in a way you can't imagine. It becomes addictive though." Close quote. And this picture you see is a cover art of Court of Assassins. This is the first book in the Ranger Archives, which is the prequel series to the Echoes Saga. So yeah, it's all so badass, right? It felt like watching a group of daredevil with swords in epic fantasy. And I won't lie, despite a few rough starting points, I ended up finishing the last quarter of The Rise of the Ranger in one sitting. It was just unputdownable. It was so explosive, it was so vivid, and I really love reading Quaintrell's action scenes. It made me ridiculously excited to read the next book of the series as soon as possible, and yeah, overall this was a pretty good book. My journey in the Echoes Saga has just begun, and if this is indeed the weakest book of the entire series, then I may have just found a new epic fantasy series to add to my list of favorite completed series of all time one day. Considering that this is one of my priority series to start and finish within this year, I will read the sequel to this book, Empire of Dirt, as soon as possible, possibly within next month. I recommend this to the fans of classic epic fantasy told in a modern voice with Tolkien as world building and also great action scenes. So yeah, that's pretty much my book review for Rise of the Ranger. As I said, this is very promising beginning. I look forward to reading the continuation as soon as possible. And also, if you have Kindle Unlimited, this book is free to get if you have Kindle Unlimited. Let me know your thoughts if you have read Rise of the Ranger or maybe the entire Echoes Saga. If not, let me know whether this book sounds interesting to you or not. And as always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye.